On a freezing winter night, 6-year-old Maya watched her single mother stay up, trying to figure out how to fix a heater they couldn't afford. Determined to help, the little girl secretly dialed a help number she found on a cereal box. What she didn't know was that her innocent call would reach a deeply lonely billionaire sitting alone in his penthouse. Just hours later, a knock sounded at their door, and the stranger who answered her plea would change their lives forever. Before we dive into this incredible story, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. The apartment on Riverside Avenue wasn't the kind of place people wrote home about. In fact, it was the kind of place people tried not to think about at all. Third-floor walk-up, radiator that clanked like an angry ghost, walls so thin you could hear Mrs. Jackson's television 3 doors down. But 6-year-old Maya Crawford thought it was perfect. Mostly because her mama lived there, and anywhere with mama was home. Maya sat cross-legged on the worn carpet, her dark brown curls pulled into 2 puffs that bounced every time she moved her head. She was studying the back of a cereal box with intense concentration, her bottom lip tucked between her teeth the way it always did when she was thinking hard. The box promised a hotline number for help with anything, but the print was so small and smudged she couldn't quite make it out. Across the cramped living room, her mother Denise moved quietly through the kitchenette. At 32, she carried herself with the kind of quiet strength that came from years of doing everything alone. Her dark skin glowed with a thin sheen of sweat despite the cold, her thick black hair twisted into a practical bun. She'd just finished an overnight shift at the hospital laundry and was trying to figure out how to tell Maya they'd be wearing extra layers to bed again tonight. The radiator had died 3 days ago. The landlord kept promising someone would come fix it. No one ever did. Mama Maya called out, still staring at the cereal box like it held the secrets of the universe. "What's this number for?" Denise glanced over, exhausted enough that the words on the box swam a little before focusing. "What number, baby? It says to call if you need help, like a magic help phone." Maya's eyes were wide with the kind of hope that only children possessed, the belief that somewhere in the world someone was waiting to solve all problems if you just knew the right number to call. "Can I call it? About the cold, maybe they can send someone to fix our heater." Denise's heart clenched painfully in her chest, that specific ache that comes from watching your child believe in solutions that don't exist. She walked over, her worn slippers shuffling against the carpet, and knelt beside her daughter. Her knees protested, sore from the standing and lifting and endless motion of her shift. She gently took the box, squinting at the fine print. The number was for a cereal company's customer service line, probably staffed by people in a call center somewhere reading from scripts about prizes and promotions. Not exactly magical, not designed to fix broken heaters in run-down apartments. "Sweetheart, I don't think they can help with our heater," Denise said softly, trying to keep the disappointment out of her voice. "But it says help with anything," Maya insisted with the absolute unshakable logic only a 6-year-old could muster, pointing at the words as if they were a binding contract. "And we need help with the cold. You said so this morning. I heard you." Denise had said that. She'd said it when she thought Maya was still asleep, whispering to herself while staring at the overdue rent notice and the broken radiator and the final warning from the electric company, and trying to figure out which bill to pay and which to let slip another month. She'd said, "We need help," to no one in particular. Maybe to God, maybe to the universe, maybe just to the cold morning air that seemed to mock her with its indifference. "Tell you what," Denise said softly, trying to redirect her daughter's hope into something more realistic. "How about we call the landlord again instead? Mr. Peterson, I'll leave another message, and maybe he'll actually listen this time." But Maya had already spotted Denise's old flip phone charging on the counter, its cord stretched taut across the small space like a lifeline. The phone was ancient by modern standards, a relic from better days, but it made calls and that was all that mattered. Before her mother could stop her, before Denise could even process what was happening, Maya darted across the room with the speed of a child on a mission, grabbed the phone, and started carefully punching in numbers. Her small fingers moved deliberately, tongue sticking out in concentration as she tried to remember the sequence she'd half memorized from the cereal box. "Maya, wait." Denise reached out, but it was too late. The phone was already ringing, that electronic trill that seemed too loud in the small apartment. Across town, in a completely different world that might as well have been on another planet, in a penthouse that overlooked the city like a castle overlooking its kingdom, 71-year-old Robert Whitmore sat alone in his study. The room was all dark wood and leather, the kind of masculine space featured in architecture magazines, with floor-to-ceiling windows showing off a view most people only saw in photographs. The city spread out below like a glittering map, lights beginning to twinkle as evening approached, but Robert wasn't looking at the view. He'd stopped seeing it years ago. He was looking at his phone, which sat on his mahogany desk like a judge rendering silent verdicts. It never rang anymore. Not really, not the calls that mattered. His children used to call all the time. Back when their mother was alive, back when family dinners happened every Sunday without fail, back when he wasn't just an old man sitting on piles of money they were waiting to inherit. Back when Dad meant something other than trust fund administrator. His daughter Sarah called once a month now, always rushed, always distracted, usually from her car between meetings. The conversations lasted maybe 5 minutes, covering weather and health in the most superficial way possible. His son James texted occasionally, usually about business matters or to share a photo from his latest vacation to somewhere exotic that Robert would never visit. Neither had actually visited in person in 8 months. 8 long months of silence interrupted only by obligatory phone calls that felt more like checking boxes than checking in. Robert told himself he didn't mind. Told himself he'd earned the solitude through years of working 70-hour weeks, of missing birthdays and recitals and family dinners in pursuit of building Whitmore Industries into the empire it became. He'd given them everything money could buy, hadn't he? The best schools, the finest homes, trust funds that meant they'd never worry. What more could they possibly want from him? But tonight, staring at the silent phone while the sun set over the city and shadows grew long across his expensive carpet, he knew the answer. He'd always known it, buried deep under decades of justification and rationalization. They'd wanted a father, not a wallet, not a name on a building, not a quarterly dividend check, just a father who showed up, who listened, who cared about more than profit margins and shareholder value. And he hadn't been that. Not when it counted. Not when his wife Helen begged him to slow down, to be present, to remember that children grew up fast and missed moments never came back. He'd always promised next time or when things settle down or after this deal closes, but next time never came, things never settled down, and there was always another deal. Helen had died 5 years ago. Cancer that came fast and merciless, and with her went the glue that held their family together. Sarah and James had each other, had their own families, had lives that continued, but Robert had his work, and when he finally decided to retire, to step back, to maybe try to reconnect, he discovered he'd waited too long. The distance had become permanent, the silence had become the new normal. The phone rang. Robert jumped slightly, actually jumped like the sound was a gunshot in the quiet study. The screen showed an unfamiliar number, not in his contacts, probably a telemarketer. Probably someone wanting money for some cause or trying to scam an old man out of his credit card information. He almost didn't answer. His finger hovered over the decline button, but something, maybe loneliness, maybe desperation, maybe just the pathetic hope that someone, anyone, wanted to talk to him, made him swipe to accept. Hello? His voice came out rougher than intended, rusty from disuse. There was a pause, background noise, faint, then a small uncertain voice that was definitely not a telemarketer. Is this the help phone? Robert blinked, completely thrown off balance. I'm sorry, who is this? I'm Maya, I'm 6. We need help because it's really cold and Mama cries when she thinks I'm sleeping and I don't know what to do. The words came out in a rush, honest and raw and heartbreaking in their simplicity. The words hit Robert like a physical blow, like someone had reached through the phone and squeezed his heart. So simple, so honest, so completely devastatingly heartbreaking. A 6-year-old, calling for help, because her mother was crying. Maya, he said gently, his voice softening in a way it hadn't in years, instinctively dropping into the tone he used to use with his own children when they were small. I think you might have the wrong number, sweetheart. The disappointment in that single syllable was crushing, like watching a balloon deflate. But the box said you help people, it said help with anything. I copied the numbers really carefully. What box? The cereal box. It had numbers on the back and I thought maybe if I called, someone could help us with the cold because Mama works so hard but we still don't have heat, and I'm scared she's going to get sick." Her voice wavered, childhood logic mixing with real fear. "Wait," Robert said quickly, surprising himself with the urgency in his voice. "Don't hang up, please tell me what's wrong. Maybe I can help anyway." In the background, he heard an older voice, sharp with alarm. "Maya, who are you talking to? Give me that phone right now. Right this instant, young lady." "But Mama," he said he might be able to help. The phone was taken with a rustling sound. A woman's voice came on, breathless, and apologetic, and tired in a way that went deeper than one missed night of sleep. "I am so sorry, sir. My daughter didn't mean to bother you. She got confused about a number on a cereal box, and I'll make sure she understands she can't just call random." "It's all right," Robert interrupted, and he meant it. Something in her voice, tired but trying so hard to be strong, reminded him painfully of his late wife Helen in the early years when money was tight and dignity was all they had left. "She said something about being cold, about your heat being out." There was a long pause. When the woman spoke again, her voice was quieter, more guarded. "Walls going up. Our heat's been out for a few days. I've called the landlord multiple times. It's being handled. I'm sorry she disturbed you. It won't happen again." "You don't need to apologize," Robert said, and then without planning it, without thinking it through, without any of the careful deliberation he usually brought to decisions, he added, "Where are you located?" "Excuse me." The suspicion in her voice was palpable. "Your address. I'd like to help with the heat situation." The woman laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was bitter and exhausted and defensive. "Sir, I don't know who you are, and I appreciate the kind thought, but we don't need charity from strangers. We're managing fine." "It's not charity," Robert said, though he wasn't entirely sure what it was. Something was pulling at him, something he hadn't felt in years. An impulse, a need, a purpose. Considerate neighbor helping neighbor, community support, whatever you want to call it. "We're not neighbors. You don't even know us, you don't know anything about us." "Then let me know you," Robert said, and his voice came out more earnest than he'd intended, almost pleading. "Please, I'm just an old man with too much time on his hands and not enough ways to be useful. Let me help, just this once, just with the heat." Another long pause. Robert could hear Maya in the background asking what the man said, could hear the woman's labored breathing as she weighed pride against her daughter's comfort. Finally, the woman sighed, a sound of exhaustion and surrender. "Riverside Avenue, Building D, Apartment 312. But I'm serious, we don't need anything more than maybe a phone number for a reliable heating person. That's it. I'll be there in an hour," Robert said, already standing, already reaching for his coat. "Wait, I didn't say you could come here. I just meant maybe you know someone who..." But Robert had already hung up, adrenaline flooding his system in a way he hadn't felt in decades. For the first time in months, possibly years, he felt something other than numb. He felt needed, actually needed, not for his money or his name or his influence, but because a little girl had reached out blindly for help and somehow found him. He grabbed his coat, his wallet, his keys, stopped in the hallway mirror and looked at himself properly for the first time in weeks. An old man stared back, gray hair that needed cutting, wrinkles that had deepened from stress and grief, expensive clothes that hung a little loose because he'd stopped caring about meals. But for just a moment, his eyes held something they hadn't in a long time. Purpose. He left behind the silent penthouse, the untouched dinner his housekeeper had left in the fridge, the award plaques on the walls and the family photos that mocked him with their frozen memories of happier times. He left behind the life that had become more prison than palace, more mausoleum than home. He didn't know Maya Crawford, he didn't know Denise Crawford, but something in that little girl's voice had cracked open a door he'd sealed shut the day his wife died and his children stopped calling except out of obligation. And as he stepped into the elevator, Robert Whitmore made a decision that would change everything, though he couldn't possibly know it yet. He was going to answer that call for help, even if he was the wrong number, even if he might be exactly the right one. The drive across town felt longer than it should have. Robert's Mercedes glided through streets that went from polished storefronts to struggling corner markets, from designer coffee shops to check-cashing places with bars on the windows. He'd lived in this city his whole life but rarely ventured into neighborhoods like this, not because they scared him, but because they reminded him of truths he'd spent decades avoiding. People struggled, really struggled, and he'd built an empire while barely noticing. Riverside Avenue looked tired in the early evening light. The buildings were old but not charming, functional but not cared for. Children played in a small playground despite the cold, their breath making little clouds as they laughed and shouted. A woman pushed a shopping cart loaded with laundry toward a laundromat 3 blocks down. Robert parked and stared up at Building D. The paint was peeling, one of the front steps had a crack running through it, but lights glowed in most windows, and he could smell someone cooking something that reminded him of his grandmother's kitchen, warm and spicy and full of life. He climbed the stairs slowly, his knee protesting each step. By the time he reached the 3rd floor, he was breathing harder than he liked to admit. He found apartment 312 and hesitated. What was he doing? He was a 71-year-old man showing up unannounced at a stranger's home because a child made a wrong number call. This was crazy, inappropriate, possibly dangerous. But then he remembered Maya's voice. "Mama cries when she thinks I'm sleeping." He knocked. Footsteps approached cautiously. The door opened a crack, chain lock still engaged. A woman's face appeared, brown eyes sharp with suspicion. "Can I help you?" Her voice was carefully neutral, ready to slam the door at any sign of threat. "Miss Crawford, I'm Robert Whitmore. We spoke on the phone about 30 minutes ago." Her eyes widened slightly, surprise and wariness mixing. "I told you we didn't need anyone to come here. I was just asking for maybe a phone number or a recommendation." "Is that the help phone man?" Maya's voice called from inside, excited and hopeful. Denise closed her eyes briefly, clearly torn between sending him away and explaining to her daughter why the nice man who'd seemed so kind on the phone wasn't allowed to help. She glanced back over her shoulder, then at Robert, then back inside again. He could see the exhaustion in every line of her face, the weight of too many responsibilities for one person. Finally she sighed, a sound of defeat and exhaustion and desperate hope all mixed together, and opened the door wider, though her body language stayed defensive. "You have 5 minutes," she said firmly, "then you need to go." Robert stepped inside and was immediately hit by the cold, not freezing, not unbearable, but far too cold for a child to live in comfortably or healthily. Maybe 60 degrees, cold enough that he could see his breath faintly when he turned away from the door. The apartment was tiny, maybe 500 square feet total, everything visible from the entryway. But it was meticulously clean. Everything had its place. A small artificial tree sat in the corner, barely 3 feet tall, decorated with exactly 5 ornaments, 3 handmade paper snowflakes, 1 mismatched bauble that looked like it came from a dollar store, and 1 popsicle stick reindeer that Maya had clearly made at school, complete with googly eyes and pipe cleaner antlers. Crayons and coloring books were stacked neatly on a coffee table that wobbled slightly. A thin blanket covered the worn couch. Everything was old, worn, used, but clean and loved and maintained with obvious care. Maya appeared from behind her mother's legs, studying him with those huge, curious eyes children have before the world teaches them to be careful. She was tiny for 6, wearing a sweater that was too big and leggings with a small hole in one knee. Her hair was done with obvious care despite her mother's exhaustion. Her socks had little cats on them. "You came," she said, amazed like she'd called the North Pole and Santa himself had shown up. "I did," Robert said, kneeling down to her level despite his protesting knee that screamed at the sudden movement. Up close, she had her mother's eyes, intelligent and searching. "And I brought something." He pulled out his phone, the number for the best heating repair company in the city. "They're available 24 hours, and they'll come right away if I call them. They know me, they'll make this a priority." Denise stiffened immediately, pride flashing across her face. "I already called our landlord, multiple times. I'm handling it." "I know," Robert said gently, standing again with effort. "But sometimes it helps to have someone with influence make the call. No obligation, no strings attached, no expectations of anything in return. Just warmer air for this young lady." He gestured at Maya, who was watching the interaction like a tennis match. Denise studied him for a long moment, her face carefully neutral. Robert could see her weighing pride against practicality, independence against her daughter's comfort, dignity against need. He recognized that look. His wife used to have it when they were young and struggling, when accepting help felt like admitting failure, before the business took off and made help unnecessary. "Why are you really here?" Denise asked quietly, cutting through the pleasantries. "No one just shows up at a stranger's house to help with heat. What do you want?" The directness surprised him. Most people danced around questions like that, but he appreciated it. It deserved an honest answer. Robert considered lying, considered making up something about civic duty or Christian charity or community responsibility. All the acceptable explanations society provided for wealthy people doing good deeds. But something in her direct gaze, that unflinching assessment, made him tell the truth. The uncomfortable, embarrassing, painful truth. "Because my own children don't call me anymore," he said quietly. "Not really, not the way that matters, and when your daughter did, even by accident, it reminded me what it felt like to be needed, to be wanted, to have someone reach out and think maybe I could help. I know that's selfish, I know it's strange and probably sounds creepy when I say it out loud. But it's the truth. I'm a lonely old man who'd forgotten what it felt like to matter to someone." The honesty seemed to surprise her, breaking through her defensive posture. Her shoulders softened slightly, not dropping all guard but relaxing from full defensive mode. "You have children?" She asked it carefully, like stepping onto ice she wasn't sure would hold. "Two, both grown, both busy with their own lives, both successful, which I guess was the point of all those years of working myself to death." He didn't mention the 8 months without a visit, didn't mention the birthday they forgot last month, didn't mention how his son's secretary now sent the Christmas cards because James was too busy. Some pains were too fresh to share with strangers. Maya tugged on his coat sleeve with the fearlessness of a child who hadn't learned about stranger danger. "Can you stay for hot chocolate? Mama makes it with extra marshmallows even though we only have the little ones from the store instead of the big fancy ones." Maya, Denise warned, but there was less edge in her voice now. But Robert was already smiling, really smiling for the first time in longer than he could remember. Not the polite smile he used in business meetings, not the practiced smile for photographs, a real genuine smile that crinkled his eyes and reached all the way to his heart. "I would love that," he said, "if your mother says it's okay." And just like that, 3 lives that had been running on parallel tracks, never meant to intersect, began to converge. Small, careful, the beginning of something none of them could possibly anticipate. Robert made the call to the heating company while Denise and Maya listened. "This is Robert Whitmore. I need an emergency repair at," he gave the address. "Yes, I know it's evening. I don't care about the overtime rates. How soon can you have someone there?" A pause. 90 minutes is fine. Bill it to my company account. Thank you." He hung up to find Denise staring at him. "They said 90 minutes. That would have taken me weeks of follow-up calls to achieve. Months probably. That's how the world works, unfortunately," Robert said. "Money talks. It's not fair, but I might as well use it for good when I can." While they waited for the repair person, Maya showed Robert every single one of her drawings, explaining each one with the serious detail of a museum curator giving a tour. This one was their building. That one was Mama at work. This one was Maya at school. That one was the cat she wished she could have, but the landlord said no pets. Each drawing told a story, simple but complete, of a life lived with love despite limitations. Denise made hot chocolate that was thin and sweet, made with water instead of milk, to stretch it further, but she'd added a drop of vanilla extract that made it smell like home. It tasted like effort, and love and making do with what you had. They sat on the couch that sagged in the middle, sipping from mismatched mugs, and talked. Not about big things at first, just small things, safe things. Maya's favorite color, purple like a queen's robe. Denise's job at the hospital, hard but stable, with benefits, which was all that mattered. The weather, the upcoming holidays. Robert's late wife gone 5 years, still missed every single day, still the first person he thought of every morning. The conversation was awkward at first, like strangers at a bus stop making small talk to pass time. But slowly, carefully, by degrees so gradual, Robert almost didn't notice, it became something else. Something warmer, something almost like connection. When the heating repair person arrived, a burly man named Marcus who whistled while he worked, Robert stayed. Denise made more hot chocolate. Maya showed Marcus her drawings too, because she had no concept of strangers, only people she hadn't made friends with yet. Marcus fixed the radiator, replaced a valve, adjusted the thermostat, and explained everything to Denise in terms she could understand. He showed her warning signs to watch for, gave her his direct number for emergencies, and refused to take a tip when Denise tried to press $10 into his hand. "Mr. Whitmore's already taking care of it, ma'am," Marcus said gently, "and honestly no kid should be cold in their own home. That's just wrong. You call me directly if it acts up again, okay?" When warmth finally began flowing through the radiators, filling the apartment with that metallic clicking sound that meant heat was coming, Maya squealed and did a little dance. She pressed her hands against the radiator, giggling at the warmth. Denise's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away, turning toward the kitchen to hide them. But Robert saw. He saw everything. That simple moment, a child celebrating basic warmth that should have been a given, broke something inside him that had been frozen for years. "Thank you," Denise said quietly as he prepared to leave, Marcus having already packed up his tools and departed with a cheerful wave. "Really, I don't know how to repay you for this." "There's nothing to repay," Robert said, meaning it absolutely, "but if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to check in. Make sure everything's still working, maybe bring dinner sometime, if you'd allow it. I know a good pizza place that delivers." Denise hesitated, wariness creeping back. Why would you want to do that?" "Because," Robert said, glancing at Maya, who was now warm and drowsy on the couch, fighting sleep and losing, she called asking for help. "And I think maybe I need help too, just a different kind. I need to remember what it feels like to do something good, something that matters, something that isn't about money or business or legacy, just about being a decent human being to another decent human being." Denise studied him for another long moment, searching his face for hidden motives, for danger, for the catch that always came with help. Then slowly she nodded. "Dinner would be okay," she said carefully, "but we split the cost." "I'm serious about that." Robert wanted to argue but recognized that look. Pride was all some people had left. "Take that away, and you took everything." "Deal," he agreed, though he had no intention of letting her pay. As he drove home that night, his phone finally rang. Sarah, his daughter, her name lighting up the screen like an accusation. "Dad, I just got a weird call from your credit card company. They flagged some unusual activity. They said you were in some neighborhood across town. Is everything all right? You're not being scammed, are you?" "Everything's fine, honey," Robert said, and realized he meant it. "Well, what were you doing there? That's not exactly your usual area." "Helping someone," he said simply, keeping his eyes on the road. "Helping who? Do we know them?" "A friend." "You don't have friends in that neighborhood, Dad." She said it without malice, just stating a fact. "I do now," Robert replied. There was confused silence on the other end. Finally, Sarah said cautiously, "Dad, are you sure you're okay? You're not lonely or doing something impulsive or..." "I'm fine, Sarah, better than I've been in a long time, actually. I'll talk to you later." He hung up before she could press further, before he had to explain something he didn't fully understand himself yet. And for reasons he couldn't fully explain, for the first time in 5 years, for the first time since Helen died and left him alone in that enormous penthouse, he felt like maybe life wasn't completely over. Like maybe there was still some purpose left, some reason to wake up in the morning, beyond routine and habit. That felt like the most honest thing he'd experienced in years. Over the next 2 weeks, Robert became a regular presence in Maya and Denise's life. Not intrusive, not overwhelming, just there. He'd show up on Saturday mornings with fresh bagels and fruit. He'd help Maya with a craft project while Denise caught up on sleep after her night shifts. He'd fix the leaky faucet the landlord kept ignoring, replace the burnt-out bulb in the hallway, bring a warm coat he claimed didn't fit him anymore but looked perfect on Denise. Each visit felt less like charity and more like family, though neither of them used that word yet. It was too soon, too complicated, too weighted with expectations and fears. But back in Robert's own world, things were shifting in ways he didn't fully notice yet, changes happening in the background, like stage sets being moved between acts. His son James called one evening, his voice tight with that particular tone that meant he'd been talking to Sarah, and they'd both agreed, Dad needed to be confronted. the children presenting a united front, just like when they were teenagers asking for extended curfews. "Dad, we need to talk about your recent spending patterns." Robert had been reading a bedtime story to Maya over FaceTime, something that had become their nightly ritual when he wasn't there in person. She loved a book about a mouse who wanted to be a chef, and Robert did all the voices, making her giggle. He put the phone on mute, held up one finger to Maya's screen. "Hold on, sweetheart, I'll call you back in 10 minutes to finish the story. Don't let your mama put you to bed until we find out if Remy gets his restaurant, okay?" "Okay, Mr. Robert, but hurry because mama makes me brush teeth in 15 minutes. He switched back to James. "What about my spending? You've been making some unusual purchases, gift cards, children's clothing, grocery store runs in neighborhoods you never go to, medical supplies, art supplies, and you wired a significant amount to a heating repair company for an address that isn't any property you own. Dad, what's going on?" Robert felt a flicker of annoyance ignite into genuine anger. "Are you monitoring my accounts, James? Mom set up those transaction alerts before she passed, remember, for security. We're concerned, Dad. This isn't like you. You don't do things like this. You don't just randomly spend money on strangers. Maybe it should have been like me all along," Robert said quietly, staring out his penthouse window at the city lights that suddenly felt very cold. "Maybe your mother was trying to tell me something all those years and I was too busy to listen." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm helping someone. A single mother and her daughter. They needed help, and I provided it. That's all. That's the whole story." Silence stretched between them, uncomfortable and heavy. Then carefully, like approaching a wild animal, "Dad, you need to be careful. There are people who specifically target elderly individuals with money. They find vulnerabilities and exploit them. This woman could be." "I'm not being taken advantage of," Robert interrupted, his voice sharper than intended, years of frustration finally breaking through his usual calm. "I'm choosing to help. There's a difference, a significant difference, and the fact that you can't see that tells me everything I need to know about how far apart we've grown. We just want to make sure you're safe, that you're thinking clearly, that you're not making decisions based on loneliness or." "I'm perfectly fine, James. Better than I've been in years, actually. More clear-headed than I've been since your mother died. Maybe you should ask yourself why that bothers you so much." Another pause, longer this time. "Sarah and I think we should come visit, talk about this in person. Maybe meet this woman and her daughter." "You don't need to do that. I'm perfectly capable of." "We want to, Dad. We'll fly in this weekend. Both of us." Robert almost laughed, but it came out bitter. "You haven't wanted to visit in 8 months. 8 months, James. Don't pretend this is about me. This is about making sure I'm not giving away your inheritance to someone you've decided is a con artist without ever meeting her." "Dad, that's not fair, isn't it?" Robert asked, and his voice was quiet now, deadly quiet, the tone he used to use in boardrooms when he was about to destroy someone's argument. "When's the last time you called to ask how I was? Not about business, not about your mother's estate, not about the foundation paperwork, just to ask how I was doing. When's the last time either of you cared about anything other than the business and the will and making sure your shares stay protected?" The silence that followed was heavy with uncomfortable truth, with years of unspoken resentment finally finding voice. Finally, James said quietly, voice smaller than before, "We'll come this weekend. Please, Dad, we're worried about you." "Fine," Robert said, suddenly tired. "Come, meet them. But I'm not changing anything. I'm not stopping. And if you're rude to them, if you make them feel small or judged or lesser, I will ask you to leave. Are we clear?" "Yes, Dad, we'll be respectful." "Good. I have to go. I promised a little girl I'd finish a story." He hung up and called Maya back. She was waiting, holding up the book to her screen. "Okay, where were we?" "Oh yes, Remy just learned that anyone can cook." But even as he read, doing the voices, making Maya laugh, part of his mind was already dreading the weekend, already imagining the tension, already preparing for the fight he knew was coming. That night, lying in his enormous empty bed in his enormous empty penthouse, sheets that cost more than some people's monthly rent, Robert realized something that should have been obvious for years. For the first time since his wife died, he wasn't lonely. For the first time since his children drifted away into their own busy lives, he had purpose. He had someone who needed him. Not his money, but him. His time, his attention, his presence. Maya waited for his calls. Denise smiled when he showed up. They made room for him at their tiny table. They shared their lives with him, and it terrified him. Because what if James and Sarah were right? What if Denise was using him? What if this all fell apart? What if he was just a lonely old fool being played? What if? But then he remembered the way Maya laughed when he made silly voices reading stories, completely unself-conscious and joyful. The way Denise's shoulders visibly relaxed when he showed up, like she could finally breathe knowing someone had her back, even if just for an afternoon. The way they'd started calling him Mr. Robert with such warmth and acceptance that it felt like a title he'd earned, rather than a name he was born with, like he'd finally become someone worth knowing. That wasn't manipulation. That wasn't some elaborate con. That was connection. Real, honest, human connection. Something his own children had forgotten how to give, or maybe he'd forgotten how to accept. The weekend arrived with heavy snow, the kind that made the city quiet and clean and almost magical. Robert picked up Sarah and James from the airport in his Mercedes, watching them in the rearview mirror as they settled into the back seat. Both were dressed in expensive coats, designer luggage, phones already out checking emails. Both looked uncomfortable the moment they left the airport, like they'd crossed into foreign territory. "Dad," Sarah said carefully after they'd been driving for 10 minutes in silence, "we want you to know we're coming from a place of love. We're not trying to control you or judge you. We're just concerned." "Noted," Robert said, eyes on the road. "We've done some research on this woman you've been helping," James added, and Robert's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Denise Crawford, single mother, works hospital laundry, history of housing instability, no father listed on the birth certificate, no extended family that we could find. Dad, the profile fits perfectly for someone who might target." "Stop," Robert said firmly, his voice cutting through the car like a knife. "I don't want to hear this, Dad. She could be targeting you specifically. Older wealthy men are particularly vulnerable too." "She didn't target me," Robert interrupted. "Her daughter called my number by accident, a complete accident. A 6-year-old looking at a cereal box and misreading digits. I chose to help. Every single choice after that was mine. Mine, not hers. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't manipulate anything. She tried to refuse my help multiple times." Sarah exchanged a loaded glance with James in the rearview mirror. "We'd still like to meet her, meet them both, make our own assessment." "Assessment," Robert repeated flatly. "You're going to assess them. Like a business deal, like property you're considering purchasing." "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant." Robert pulled over suddenly, not violently but deliberately, parking at the side of the road. He turned to face his children in the back seat, really face them for the first time in longer than he could remember. "Let me ask you both something," he said quietly. "When's the last time you asked about my day? Not my health, not the business, not the estate paperwork, my day, what I did, what I felt, what mattered to me." Both of them flinched, neither answering. "When's the last time you visited without wanting something? When's the last time you called just to talk? When's the last time you treated me like I was more than an obligation or a bank account or a name in your contacts list that you check off monthly?" "We've been busy, Dad," Sarah said, but her voice was small. "You know that. Jobs, kids, life. It's not personal." "Everything is personal," Robert said. "Your mother knew that. She always made time. She called her mother every single day, even when she was exhausted, even when it was hard, even when her mother was difficult. Because family isn't something you fit in between meetings. It's not a box you check. It's supposed to be the priority. And I didn't understand that. I was too busy building a company, making money, securing your futures, and now you're both so secure you don't need me anymore. Except to make sure I don't give away your inheritance." "We do need you," James whispered, and to Robert's surprise, his son's eyes were bright with tears. "We do, Dad." "No," Robert said gently but firmly. "You need my money. You need the business. You need the legacy.
There's a difference, a huge difference, and I finally found people who need me, not what I can give them. They need my time, my attention, my presence, and yes, they need practical help too, but that's not the foundation. The foundation is that they see me, really see me, as a person, not a wallet." He took a breath, steadying himself. "So if you want to meet Denise and Maya, you're welcome to, but you will treat them with respect, with kindness, with the basic human decency your mother tried to teach you. They've given me more in 2 weeks than either of you have given me in years, and I won't let you make them feel small or judged, or lesser just because they don't have money." The silence in the car was deafening, thick with years of unspoken resentments and uncomfortable truths. Finally Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Okay, Dad, we'll meet them, and we'll be respectful. I promise." James nodded too. "I'm sorry, you're right, about all of it."
Robert pulled back onto the road, heading toward Riverside Avenue, toward the family that chose him back, that needed him not for what he had but for who he was, toward the hardest conversation his children had ever faced. Denise nearly dropped the plate she was drying when Robert called to say he was bringing his children over, not asked if it was okay, not requested permission, just stated he was bringing them, in 30 minutes. "Robert, I don't think that's a good idea," she said carefully, pressing the phone between her ear and shoulder while her hands automatically continued the familiar rhythm of washing dishes. "We're not exactly prepared for company. The place is clean but it's not. We don't have—" "I know," Robert interrupted, and she could hear something in his voice. Tension, determination, maybe anger, but they insisted on meeting you. They flew in specifically for this. And I'd rather do it now on my terms than have them showing up unannounced later or continuing to investigate you behind your back." Denise felt her stomach drop. "Investigate? They've been looking into your background, your employment history, your housing situation. They think you might be taking advantage of me." The words hit like a slap. Denise set the plate down carefully, gripping the edge of the counter. "And what do you think? I think they don't understand what family actually means anymore. I think they've forgotten that caring about someone doesn't require a background check." Denise was quiet for a moment, her mind racing through a dozen different scenarios, none of them good. "Okay," she said finally. "Bring them. But Robert, if they're rude to Maya, if they say anything that makes her feel bad or scared or small, I will ask them to leave. I don't care who they are or what they think or what kind of investigation they ran. My daughter's emotional safety comes first. Always. If they're rude to Maya, I'll ask them to leave myself." Robert said firmly, "You have my word." 30 minutes later, Maya was wearing her best dress, the purple one with the slightly torn hem that Denise had mended 3 times. Denise had changed out of her comfortable home clothes into nicer jeans and a sweater that didn't have any visible stains or holes. She'd straightened the apartment, though there wasn't much to straighten. She'd put out the box of store-brand cookies she'd been saving. Made coffee even though they barely had enough for the week. When the knock came, Maya ran to the door with her characteristic enthusiasm. She loved visitors. She loved people. She didn't understand yet about judgments and investigations and rich people looking down on poor people. Denise put a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Wait, baby, let me answer it." She opened the door to find Robert flanked by 2 well-dressed strangers who looked at the building, the hallway, the apartment, like they'd landed on another planet entirely. The woman was maybe late 30s, attractive in a polished way, wearing a coat that probably cost more than Denise made in a month. The man was slightly older, tall, with Robert's eyes but harder, more guarded. "Hello," Denise said evenly, keeping her voice neutral and her spine straight. "I'm Denise. Please come in." Robert entered first, giving her an apologetic look. "Denise, Maya, these are my children. Sarah and James. They wanted to meet you." Maya peeked out from behind her mother's leg, her earlier enthusiasm dampened by the tension she could feel even if she didn't understand it. "Who are they?" she asked quietly. "These are Mr. Robert's grown-up children," Denise explained gently. "Sarah and James, they wanted to meet us." Sarah stepped forward first, her smile practiced but not quite reaching her eyes. "Hello, Maya, it's nice to meet you. Your mother is very lucky to have such a sweet daughter." Maya studied her with the serious assessing look children get when they're not sure about an adult yet. "Are you Mr. Robert's little girl?" "Despite everything," Despite the tension and suspicion, Sarah's expression softened genuinely at that. I suppose I am, though not so little anymore. You're really big, Maya observed. Bigger than Mama. Do you have to eat all your vegetables to get that big? Sarah laughed, a real laugh this time. I did eat quite a lot of vegetables, yes. James hung back, arms crossed defensively, his eyes sweeping the apartment with obvious assessment, cataloging everything. The second-hand furniture, the patched walls, the two small television, the handmade decorations. Denise could practically see him tallying up their poverty, confirming his suspicions about her motivations. Can I offer you some coffee? Denise asked, forcing herself to be polite despite wanting to tell them to leave. I made some, and I have cookies. They're not homemade, but Maya picked them out herself. That won't be necessary, James said stiffly, still standing by the door like he might need to make a quick escape. We just wanted to meet you briefly. We won't take up much of your time, James, Robert warned, his voice sharp. But Denise raised a hand, stopping him. It's all right, Robert, let him speak. Let's clear the air right now. She looked directly at James, meeting his gaze without flinching. You're worried about your father spending time with strangers. You think I might be manipulating him, taking advantage of his loneliness, trying to get access to his money. That's why you're here, to assess the situation and protect your inheritance. Sarah's face flushed. We're not accusing you of. Yes, you are. Denise interrupted gently but firmly, and honestly, I don't blame you. If my daughter was grown and my elderly parent was suddenly spending significant time with people we didn't know, giving them money, helping them in ways that seemed out of character, I'd be concerned too. I'd want to make sure they were okay. That's natural. That's love, even if it's expressed through suspicion. She took a breath, choosing her words carefully. So let me make this very simple and clear. I didn't ask Robert for anything. My daughter called his number by accident, trying to reach a cereal company helpline. She's 6. She misread the numbers. Robert offered to help with our heat. Everything since then has been his choice, his initiative, his offer. Not my manipulation. I've tried multiple times to refuse help, to keep appropriate boundaries, to not take advantage. She gestured around the small apartment. Look around. Do you see new furniture? A new television? Expensive decorations? Do you see any evidence of me milking your father for money? The only things he's given us are practical necessities, heat repair, groceries occasionally, children's books from the library sale. Nothing extravagant. Nothing inappropriate. James's expression flickered with something. Surprise maybe, or respect, or shame. Can I ask you something? Denise continued, her voice softer now. When's the last time you visited your father? Before today. Sarah's face flushed deeper red. We've been busy with work and families and 8 months, Robert said quietly from behind them. It's been 8 months since either of you came to see me. But we called, James protested weakly. Once a month, for 5 minutes. While you're driving somewhere else. Robert's voice was sad, not angry. Just sad. Neither of you came for my birthday. Neither of you visited for Thanksgiving. Christmas cards arrived from your assistants, not from you. Maya, who'd been watching everything with wide, serious eyes, suddenly spoke up with the blunt honesty only children possess. That's a really long time to not see your daddy, she said, looking between Sarah and James with something like confusion. I see my mama every day, even when she's tired from working all night, because we love each other. Don't you love Mr. Robert? The simple question landed like a bomb in the small apartment. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Of course we do. Of course we love him. Then why don't you visit? Maya asked, genuinely confused by logic that made no sense to her 6-year-old mind. When you love someone you want to see them. That's how love works. James cleared his throat uncomfortably, looking at his sister, then at his father, then back at Maya. Then, surprising everyone including himself, he uncrossed his arms and moved to sit down on the couch. You're absolutely right, he said to Maya. We should visit more, we should call more, we should be better children. He looked at Denise. I think I would like that coffee now, if the offer still stands. Denise nodded slowly. Of course. As she moved to the kitchen, Robert joined her, speaking low enough that the others couldn't hear. I'm sorry I shouldn't have sprung this on you without more warning. I should have given you time to prepare. No, Denise interrupted, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. You absolutely should have done exactly this. Because now they've met us. Now they can see we're real people, not con artists or opportunists or whatever they were imagining. Now they can see how their father looks when he's here. How relaxed he is. How happy. And maybe, just maybe, they can start asking themselves the hard question. What question? Why their father needed to find family somewhere else. She handed him a mug. Why a stranger and her daughter could give him something his own children couldn't or wouldn't. That's the question that should be keeping them up at night. Robert looked at her with such gratitude and respect that Denise had to look away, busying herself with sugar and cream she couldn't really afford but kept for occasions like this. Back in the living room, Maya had climbed onto the couch next to Sarah and was showing her drawings with renewed enthusiasm, the earlier wariness forgotten the way only children can forget. This is Mr. Robert fixing our heater, Maya explained, holding up a picture with stick figures and lots of red and orange scribbles for fire. See, this is before when it was broken and we were cold. And this is Mama sleeping after work because she gets really tired. And this is me being brave even though I was scared. Sarah studied the drawing, really looked at it this time, seeing past the childish execution to the story it told. What were you scared of? Being cold forever, Maya said matter-of-factly, and Mama crying at night when she thought I couldn't hear. But then Mr. Robert came and fixed everything. He's like magic, but real magic. Not pretend magic. Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she held the drawing. He is good at that. At fixing things. I'd almost forgotten. Is he your Mr. Robert too? Maya asked innocently. He used to be, Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. I think maybe I forgot that. Maybe we both did. She looked at James. James was watching his sister, something cracking in his careful, defended expression. When Denise returned with coffee, he accepted his cup with a quiet thank you that sounded genuine, not perfunctory. They sat together in the small apartment, the conversation awkward and halting at first. But Maya, bless her, filled the silences with her endless chatter about school and her best friend Jasmine and the book Mr. Robert was reading to her and how she wanted to be a chef when she grew up. Or maybe a princess, or maybe a chef princess, which would be the best thing ever. Gradually, imperceptibly, like ice melting on a warm day, the tension began to ease. Sarah asked Denise about her work, real questions about what the job was like, not patronizing questions designed to assess her worthiness. James asked Robert about his knee that had been bothering him, showed genuine concern when Robert mentioned he'd been meaning to see a doctor but kept putting it off. Maya insisted everyone see her newest masterpiece, a crayon portrait of the whole family that included all of them, even Sarah and James, who'd just met her 20 minutes ago. And somewhere in the midst of the coffee and cookies and honest conversation, something shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but definitely meaningfully shifted. Sarah looked at her father, really looked at him for the first time in years, and saw how he laughed with Maya. Saw how comfortable he seemed here in this cramped apartment with mismatched furniture. Saw how Denise treated him with respect but not reverence, like an equal instead of a bank account, like a person instead of an inheritance. James watched his father fix Maya's broken toy car with the same patient care he used to show when James was young and brought him broken things to fix. The memory hit hard, unwelcome but insistent. Dad at the kitchen table, tools spread out, showing him how to tighten screws and reconnect wires, making time even after long days at work, being present in ways James had forgotten. Dad, Sarah said suddenly, interrupting a story Maya was telling about a frog at the park. I owe you an apology, a really big one. Robert looked up, surprised by the crack in her voice. We've been terrible, she continued, tears finally spilling over that she'd been holding back. We turned into exactly what Mom was always afraid we'd become. People who cared more about money and status and success than about family and connection and love. Sarah, you don't have to. No, let me say this. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, mascara smudging, but she didn't care. When Mom died, we should have held together. We should have leaned on each other and processed our grief and stayed close. Instead we drifted apart, we let work and life and our own families separate us from you.
We left you alone in that enormous penthouse with nothing but memories and silence. James nodded slowly, something breaking in him too. She's right. We did. We told ourselves you were fine, that you liked the solitude, that you were busy with the business. But really we just found it easier to stay away than to deal with our own grief and your grief and the fact that without Mom we didn't know how to be a family anymore. Robert's throat tightened, years of loneliness and resentment and hurt suddenly finding validation. I wasn't exactly easy to be around after your mother died. That's not an excuse, James said firmly. You're our father, we should have tried harder. Called more, visited, showed up. Instead it took a 6-year-old girl dialing a wrong number to do what we couldn't or wouldn't do. Maya looked between them, confused by the heavy emotion but understanding somehow that something important was happening. What did I do? She asked quietly. Robert pulled her into his lap, his eyes bright with tears he'd been holding back for years. You reminded everyone what matters, sweetheart. You reminded us all that family is something you choose and build and fight for, not something that just happens because you share blood. Sarah reached across the coffee table and took her father's hand, the first real physical contact they'd had in longer than either could remember. Can we start over, all of us, really try this time? I'd like that, Robert said quietly, his voice thick. I'd like that very much. Denise stood quietly, intending to give them privacy, to let them have this family moment without an outsider watching. But James stopped her. Please stay, he said quickly. Then softer, you're part of this too, whatever this is becoming. You're part of it. And in that moment, in that small apartment that could barely fit everyone, two families that had been broken in different ways began the slow, careful, painful, beautiful process of healing. Together, not separate anymore. Together, the weeks following that first tense meeting transformed into something none of them expected. Sarah started calling her father twice a week, real calls where they talked about life instead of business. James visited every Sunday, bringing his wife and daughter, a quiet 8-year-old named Emma, who immediately bonded with Maya over their shared love of drawing, and slowly, painfully, beautifully, the Whitmore family began remembering how to be a family. But Robert noticed something else too. The more time he spent with Denise, the more he saw the weight she carried. She was exhausted. Not just physically, though the night shifts were taking their toll, but exhausted in a deeper way, the exhaustion of someone who'd been running on fumes for years. One evening, after Maya was asleep and Sarah had just left with Emma, Robert found Denise sitting at her tiny kitchen table with a notebook and calculator. Bills spread out in front of her like accusations. Everything all right? He asked, though he could clearly see it wasn't. Denise looked up, startled. She'd forgotten he was still there, had assumed he'd left when Sarah did. Fine, she said automatically, that reflexive lie people tell when they're drowning but don't want to burden others. Then, seeing his expression, seeing the concern and care in his eyes, she sighed. It's just budget stuff, nothing exciting. Same thing every month, trying to figure out which bills to pay and which ones can wait another month without catastrophic consequences. Robert pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, the cheap wooden chair creaking under his weight. May I ask you something, and please, tell me if I'm overstepping. I know I have a tendency to do that. Denise set down her pen warily, her defenses going up automatically. Okay. What would you be doing if money wasn't an issue? He held up a hand before she could protest. I know that's not reality, I know it's an impossible hypothetical, but humor me. If you could do anything, if money was no object, what would it be? The question clearly surprised her. She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes going distant, like she was accessing a part of herself she'd locked away years ago because wanting things you couldn't have was too painful. Why do you ask? Because I've been thinking. Robert said carefully, you work incredibly hard. You take care of Maya beautifully, manage this place, handle impossible situations with grace, never complain. But I don't think I've ever heard you talk about what you want, what you dream about, what would make you happy beyond just surviving. Denise laughed, but it was hollow, bitter. Dreams are luxuries I can't afford, Robert. They don't pay rent, they don't feed my daughter, they don't keep the lights on. I understand that, but humor me anyway. She studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face for mockery or pity. Finding neither, she slowly let her guard down, just a little. "I used to want to be a chef," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of a confession. "Not fancy cooking with foam and tweezers, just good home cooking. Soul food, comfort food that makes people feel loved and cared for and like someone's grandmother just gave them a hug. The food my grandmother used to make, collard greens and cornbread and mac and cheese that could make you cry, it was so good." She paused, lost in memory. "I went to community college for a year, started the culinary program. I was good at it. Really good. The instructors said I had natural talent, that instinct you can't teach. I dreamed about having my own small catering business someday. Nothing big or fancy, just enough to work for myself, set my own hours, be there when Maya got home from school instead of working nights and weekends and missing everything. What happened? I got pregnant. Maya's father left the day I told him, said he wasn't ready to be a father, that I was on my own. School became impossible, between working to save money and being sick all the time and then having a newborn, there was no way to continue. So I dropped out, got a job that had benefits. Focused on survival. Do you still want it? Robert asked gently. Wanting doesn't change reality. Wanting doesn't pay for culinary school or business licenses or commercial kitchen space or any of the 1,000 things you need to start a catering business. That's not what I asked. I asked if you still want it, if the dream is still there. Denise's eyes filled unexpectedly with tears that she quickly tried to blink away. Yes, she whispered, her voice breaking. Every single day, I dream about having my own business, about cooking food that matters, about working for myself instead of loading other people's dirty laundry into machines for 12 hours straight, about being able to pick Maya up from school and help with homework and not be so exhausted I can barely function. But that's all it is, Robert, a dream, not reality. Robert was quiet for a moment, his mind already working, calculating, planning. Then he leaned forward, his voice serious and intent. But if it wasn't just a dream, what if you could actually do it? What if you could start your business? What would you need to make it happen? Denise shook her head firmly. Robert, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I'm not trying to buy you. Robert interrupted gently but firmly. I'm trying to invest in you. There's a significant difference, and I need you to understand that. I don't understand the difference. Robert took a breath, choosing his words carefully. I've spent my whole life building businesses, making investments, watching money grow and multiply. I'm very good at it. It's literally what I did for 50 years, but you know what I never did? I never helped someone build their dream just because they deserved it. Just because they had talent and drive and vision but lacked only capital. He leaned forward intently. I'm asking you, Denise Crawford, to let me invest in you. Not as charity, not as a handout, as a business partner. A real partnership with real terms. Robert, I can't accept money from you. It's not right, it's not. 60-40 split, he continued, as if she hadn't spoken, pulling out his phone and opening a notes app. You take 60% ownership for the work and the vision and the talent. I take 40% for the capital investment. You make all the creative decisions, menu, branding, clients, everything culinary. I help with the business side, licensing, accounting, legal structure, marketing strategy. We build something together. Equal partners with different roles. Denise stared at him, speechless, her mind unable to process what he was proposing. I've watched you, Denise, Robert continued, his voice passionate now. I've tasted your cooking. Sunday dinners here have been better than any 5-star restaurant I've been to. I've seen how you manage this apartment, Maya, your job, impossible situations, all with grace and skill that most executives I know don't possess. You're not a charity case, you're a smart, capable, talented woman who's been dealt a difficult hand. I'm just offering to help you play it better. Why? Denise whispered, tears streaming down her face now. Why would you do this? What do you get out of it? Robert's expression softened. My daughter Sarah reminded me that we turned into people who care more about money than people, and I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want my legacy to be buildings and stock portfolios and trust funds. I want it to be helping someone build something beautiful, something that matters. He paused, his own eyes growing bright. Maya called me by accident and gave me a purpose I'd lost. You've treated me like family when my own family forgot how. You've given me Sunday dinners and bedtime stories and a reason to wake up in the morning that isn't just routine and loneliness. This isn't charity, Denise. This is me saying thank you in the only way I know how. By helping you build the dream you deserve. Denise was crying openly now, not even trying to hide it anymore. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Robert urged. Say you'll let me help you build something you can be proud of. Say you'll let yourself dream again, but this time with a concrete plan and capital and support to make it real. For a long moment, Denise just sat there, overwhelmed by the offer, by the possibilities, by the terrifying hope that was blooming in her chest like spring flowers after a long winter. Finally she nodded, her voice barely audible. Okay, I'll try. I'll let you help me. God help me, I'll try. Robert smiled, really smiled, the kind of smile that transforms a face. That's all I'm asking. Just try. They stayed up late that night, long after they should have gone to bed, planning. Denise shared recipes she'd been perfecting for years, scribbled on scraps of paper and in the margins of notebooks. Menus she'd sketched out in quiet moments at work when she should have been focusing on laundry but couldn't stop her mind from wandering to the impossible dream. Ideas she'd buried because they seemed too big, too unrealistic, too far beyond her reach. Robert took notes, asked questions, approached it with the same seriousness and focus he'd given to any business deal in his 50-year career. But this felt different, better, more human, more meaningful. They talked about starting small, catering for small events, building a reputation, growing organically, about commercial kitchen space they could rent by the hour, about licensing and insurance and health codes, about marketing and pricing and how to compete in a crowded market, about what made her food special, what would set her apart. It's about love, Denise said finally, trying to articulate what made her cooking different. When my grandmother cooked, you could taste the love in it. Every dish was made with care and intention, and the desire to nourish not just bodies but souls. That's what I want to do. Cook food that feels like home, like someone who loves you made it just for you. Robert wrote that down word for word. That's your brand, right there. That's what you're selling, not just food. Love. When he finally left that night, well past midnight, Denise stood in the doorway watching him go. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something dangerous and wonderful. Hope, real tangible hope that maybe her life could be different. That maybe she didn't have to work herself to death at a job that exhausted her. That maybe she could build something of her own. That maybe dreams weren't just for other people. She closed the door quietly and looked around her tiny apartment. Tomorrow morning she'd still wake up and go to work at the hospital laundry, still struggle to pay bills and keep food on the table, still worry about Maya and money and the future. But now there was a plan, a partner, a path forward, and that changed everything. 3 months later, Denise's kitchen opened in a small commercial space Robert had found on Maple Street. It wasn't fancy, just a warm, welcoming storefront with big windows and a sign Maya had helped design. The menu was simple: soul food, comfort classics, everything made with love and skill. The opening was deliberately small, just family and close friends. They didn't want the pressure of a big public launch until Denise felt ready. The Whitmores were there: Robert, Sarah and her family, James and Catherine and Emma. Denise's co-workers from the hospital laundry, women who'd supported her through everything, who'd covered her shifts and loaned her money and become like sisters. Mrs. Jackson from the apartment building. Maya's teacher, the heating repair guy Marcus, who'd become a friend. A handful of neighbors who'd watched Maya grow up. Sarah stood beside Robert, watching Denise greet each person with genuine warmth, her exhaustion replaced by excitement and nervous energy. "Dad, you did a good thing here. A really good thing. We did a good thing," Robert corrected gently. "You helped with the marketing plan. James handled all the legal paperwork. Catherine set up the accounting system. This is a family project. But you're the one who believed in her when everyone else just saw a laundry worker. I saw someone with talent who needed a chance, that's all. James approached with his wife, both carrying plates loaded with food. Dad, the food is incredible, seriously incredible. If she markets this right, she's going to be hugely successful. I was thinking we could help her set up a catering program, reach out to corporate clients maybe. Slow down, Robert said with a laugh. Let her get through the first week before you start planning world domination. I'm just saying she has something special here. We should help her maximize the opportunity. We will, Robert agreed, but on her timeline, not ours. This is her dream. We're just supporting it. Maya ran past wearing a tiny apron that said Junior Chef in iron-on letters that were already starting to peel. She was pulling Emma behind her, both girls giggling about something. Robert watched them with a fullness in his chest that felt almost painful, that ache of complete happiness that's so intense it almost hurts.
Sarah noticed, touching his arm gently. You're different, Dad, happier, lighter somehow. I am, he admitted, not taking his eyes off the bustling restaurant, off Denise laughing with a customer, off Maya and Emma chasing each other between tables. For the first time in years I feel like I'm doing something that actually matters. Not just making money or building empires or securing legacies, but actually making a difference in real people's lives. You always mattered, Sarah said softly, her voice thick with emotion. We just forgot to tell you. We forgot to show you. We took you for granted. Robert squeezed her hand. We all made mistakes. What matters is we're fixing them now. We're here. We're together. We're actually being a family. Yeah, Sarah whispered. We are. Later that evening, after the last customer left and the space was quiet except for the sound of dishes being washed, Denise found Robert sitting at one of the tables, looking around with satisfaction. Thank you, she said, sliding into the chair across from him, for all of this, for believing in me. You already thanked me, multiple times today alone. I mean it though, this changed my life. Maya's life, everything. You changed your own life, Robert said firmly. I just believed in you when you'd stopped believing in yourself, and I provided some capital. But the talent, the vision, the hard work, that was all you. Don't minimize what you've accomplished. Denise sat back, looking around her restaurant with wonder. I own a business. I actually own a business, a real business with customers and revenue, and a commercial kitchen, and everything. 60% of a very successful business, Robert corrected with a smile. I'm just the junior partner who gets 40% for funding it. You know what's funny, Denise said after a moment. 3 months ago I was planning to give up, pack up everything, move back to my hometown in Alabama, move in with my aunt, give up on the city and my dreams and everything. I thought we couldn't make it here. I was ready to quit. What changed your mind? You did. Maya calling you did. You showing up at our door and seeing us as more than just poor people who needed charity. You saw potential. You saw me, really saw me, in a way I hadn't been seen in years, and you made me remember that I used to be someone with dreams and goals and ambitions. Robert felt his throat tighten with emotion. You remind me of someone I loved very much. Your wife, he nodded. Helen. She had dreams too. She wanted to be a teacher. Elementary school, 2nd grade specifically. She loved kids at that age, when they're still excited about learning, when everything is new and magical. But she put everything on hold to support me while I built the business, and his voice broke slightly. I never gave her the chance to go back to it. I always said next year, or when things settled down or after this deal closes, but next year never came. Things never settled down, and she died without ever getting her classroom. Denise reached across the table and took his hand. I'm sorry, that must be hard to carry. So when I see you, Robert continued, his voice rough with emotion, sacrificing everything for Maya, working yourself to exhaustion, putting your dreams in a box you think you'll never open again. I see Helen, and I see all the chances I didn't give her, all the ways I failed her, and I don't want to fail again. I don't want to watch another talented woman give up on her dreams because she doesn't have support. Tears slipped down Denise's cheeks. You haven't failed anyone, Robert. You're giving me what you couldn't give her. That's not failure. That's love. That's honor. That's making sure her dreams live on through someone else. Robert had to look away, blinking hard against tears of his own. "You deserve more than survival, Denise," he said finally. "You deserve your dream too, and now you have it. You're living it. Every day you're proving that you were always capable of this. You just needed someone to open the door." They sat together in the quiet restaurant, exhausted but happy, looking at what they'd built together. Not just a business, a future, a legacy, a proof that dreams deferred don't have to be dreams denied forever. "Get some rest," Edward said finally, standing. "Big day tomorrow. Your first full day of actual service." "I'm terrified," Denise admitted. "Good. That means you care. You'll be amazing." As he walked to his car, Robert felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just happiness or satisfaction, but genuine pride. Not the hollow pride of closing a big deal or seeing his company's stock price rise, but real pride in helping someone achieve something that mattered. He'd spent 50 years building things, but this Denise's kitchen was the first thing he'd built that would actually change lives. That would nourish not just bodies but souls. That would prove that investing in people mattered more than investing in profit. And it felt better than any business success ever had. Winter melted into spring, and with it came changes none of them had anticipated. Denise's kitchen became a neighborhood staple, written up in local papers, praised on social media, growing steadily without losing its heart. Denise hired 2 employees and started catering small events. Robert was there for all of it. Not micromanaging, just supporting. He'd show up with Maya after school, help with prep work, taste new recipes and offer business advice when asked. He'd become as much a fixture as the hand-painted signs and mismatched chairs that gave the place its charm. His own children visited frequently now. Sarah helped with marketing, using her corporate connections to spread the word. James handled the accounting, teaching Denise how to manage growth without losing control. And their families blended seamlessly, Sunday dinners rotating between the restaurant, Robert's penthouse, and sometimes the small apartment Denise and Maya still called home. But the best change came on a Thursday afternoon in April. Robert was helping Maya with homework at one of the restaurant tables when his phone rang. An unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something, maybe the memory of another wrong number that changed everything, made him pick up. "Hello, Dad?" Robert's heart stopped. Not Sarah's voice, not James's, a voice he hadn't heard in 9 years, not since a screaming match that ended with a slammed door and silence that had lasted nearly a decade. "Michael?" His voice came out as barely a whisper, shock and hope and fear all tangled together. "Yeah, Dad, it's me." A pause, heavy with emotion. "Can we talk?" Robert stood quickly, moving to a quieter corner of the restaurant. Maya looked up, concerned by the sudden change in his demeanor, but Denise gently redirected her attention. "Of course, yes, absolutely. I've been following what you've been doing. The restaurant, the partnership with Denise. Sarah told me about the changes, about how different you are, about." Michael's voice broke. "Dad, I'm calling because I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for the things I said, for staying away, for holding on to anger so long that it became my whole identity." Robert felt tears spring to his eyes. "Michael, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. I've been angry at you for so long. Angry that you worked so much. Angry that you missed so much. Angry that you weren't the father I wanted you to be. But I never asked what you were going through. Never tried to understand why you worked so hard. Never gave you a chance to explain or change or be different." Robert swallowed hard, struggling to find words. "I deserved your anger. I wasn't there. I prioritized work over you, over your mother, over everything that actually mattered. You had every right to be angry. Maybe, but holding on to it for 9 years, cutting you out completely, refusing to come to family events, that wasn't right either. I turned into exactly what I accused you of being, someone so focused on being right that I forgot about love." "What changed?" Robert asked quietly. "Sarah told me about Maya. About how a 6-year-old's phone call woke you up in a way we couldn't. About how you've changed your whole life, your priorities, your focus, and I realized something. If you could change at 71, if you could admit you were wrong and do better, then maybe I could do the same at 43. Robert had to sit down, legs suddenly weak. "Where are you?" "I'm in town, just for tonight. I have a work conference but I scheduled an extra day because I wanted to see you, if you'll see me."
Of course I'll see you. God, Michael, of course. Where are you staying? They made plans to meet for dinner, at the restaurant naturally, in 2 hours. After hanging up, Robert just sat there, phone in his hand, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't name. Denise found him like that, staring into space. Robert, what happened? Are you okay? My son called. My youngest son Michael, the one I haven't spoken to in 9 years. He wants to see me. Denise's face broke into a huge smile. Robert, that's wonderful. That's amazing. I don't know what to say to him. What if he's still angry? What if we just fight again? What if Denise knelt beside his chair, taking his hands. You're different now. He knows that. That's why he called. Just be honest. Be the man you've become, not the man you were 9 years ago. 2 hours later, Robert sat at a corner table in Denise's kitchen, hands trembling slightly as he waited. Denise had closed the restaurant early, giving them privacy. Only she and Maya remained, quietly cleaning up in the back. The door opened. A man walked in, tall and broad-shouldered, with Robert's eyes and Helen's smile. Gray was starting to show at his temples. He walked with a slight limp from an old sports injury. He looked nervous and hopeful and scared. Dad, Michael, they stared at each other across the space, 9 years of silence and hurt and regret hanging between them. Then Michael crossed the distance in 3 quick strides and pulled his father into a hug. Not a polite hug. A real one, tight and desperate, and full of everything words couldn't say. Robert held his son and cried. Actually cried. Tears he'd been holding for 9 years finally finding release. I'm sorry, they both said at the same time, which made them both laugh through tears. They sat down, and the words came tumbling out. Michael talking about his life, his wife who Robert had never met, his 10-year-old son who didn't know his grandfather. The years wasted in stubborn pride. Robert talking about losing Helen, about the loneliness, about Maya's call and how it changed everything, about learning what actually mattered. They talked for hours, until Maya fell asleep with her head on one of the tables, and Denise quietly covered her with a jacket. Can I meet her? Michael asked. The little girl who changed everything. Robert gently woke Maya, who was confused and sleepy. Maya, sweetheart, this is my son Michael. He came to visit. Maya studied him seriously. Are you the son who was mad? Michael laughed, surprised by her directness. Yes, I was the son who was mad. But I'm not mad anymore. Good, Maya said firmly. Because Mr. Robert is the best and you should love him. I do love him, Michael said softly. I never stopped, I just forgot for a while. Before leaving, Michael pulled out his phone and showed Robert pictures of his grandson. His name is Robert, named him after you, even though we weren't speaking. I wanted him to carry your name because despite everything, you were still my father. Robert stared at the pictures of a boy he'd never met, tears streaming down his face. He's beautiful, they're beautiful. I'd like you to meet them, if you want to. I'd love nothing more. They made plans, real plans, for Michael to bring his family to visit in 2 weeks, for Robert to finally meet his grandson and daughter-in-law, for family dinners and catching up and rebuilding what had been broken. As Michael prepared to leave, he looked around the restaurant with appreciation. This place is special, Dad. You can feel it. The love, the care, the community. Mom would have loved this. I think she sent Maya to me, Robert said quietly. I think somehow she knew I needed this, needed to remember what mattered. Maybe she did. Michael hugged his father again. I love you, Dad. I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. I love you. I love you too, son. Always have, always will. After Michael left, Robert sat alone in the quiet restaurant, overwhelmed by gratitude and grace and the mysterious ways life worked when you let it. Denise joined him, sitting in comfortable silence. Your family is whole again, she said finally. Our family, Robert corrected gently. You and Maya are part of it too. This only happened because she called. Because you let me in. Because you gave me purpose and hope, and a reason to be better. We saved each other, Denise said, echoing words from months ago. Yes, we did. They sat together as night deepened outside, the city lights twinkling through the windows like promises kept, like second chances realized, like family forged in unexpected places. And Robert felt something he hadn't felt since long before Helen died. Peace. Complete, whole, unshakable peace. 1 year after Denise's kitchen opened, Robert called a family meeting. Everyone gathered at the restaurant on a Sunday evening. Denise and Maya, Sarah and her family, James and Catherine and Emma, and Michael, who'd made the trip specifically for this, bringing his wife Jennifer, and 10-year-old Robert Jr., who everyone called RJ. The restaurant was closed to the public, tables pushed together to create one long surface covered in papers and blueprints and architectural drawings. "I have a proposal," Robert began, standing at the head of the table like he used to in boardrooms, except his voice was warmer now, more human. "Something I've been working on with my foundation board, something I want all of you to be part of." He unveiled the first blueprint, a large building, 3 stories, with commercial kitchen space, classrooms, community gathering areas, offices, the Crawford Whitmore Community Kitchen and Learning Center. He announced, "A place that builds on what we've created here, but bigger, more ambitious, more impactful." He explained his vision, a place that would offer cooking classes to anyone who wanted to learn, regardless of ability to pay. Job training for people trying to enter the food service industry. After-school programs for kids like Maya, teaching them about nutrition and cooking and food culture. Community meals for anyone who needed them, no questions asked. Commercial kitchen space that could be rented affordably by people starting food businesses, just like Denise had. The profits from the 3 Denise's kitchen locations, he paused as Denise gasped, not having heard about expansion plans yet, will help fund this center. Along with my foundation and corporate sponsorships, James has been working on securing. It'll be a sustainable model, not dependent on charity, but built on the success we've already proven is possible. Sarah was crying. "Dad, this is incredible. It's what your mother would have wanted," Robert said quietly. "She always believed in giving back, in lifting people up, in using resources to create opportunities. This is her legacy as much as mine." He looked at Denise, "And it's your legacy too. You proved that investing in people works, that believing in someone can change their life, and through them, change a whole community. I want to do that on a larger scale." Denise couldn't speak, overwhelmed. "There's one more thing," Robert continued. "I'm establishing college funds for Maya, Emma, and RJ, full rides wherever they want to go, whatever they want to study. And I'm setting up a scholarship program in Helen's name for single parents pursuing education or starting businesses. What happened with Denise shouldn't be rare. It should be normal. People shouldn't have to choose between dreams and survival." James stood and hugged his father, really hugged him. "Dad, you're going to change so many lives." "We're going to change lives," Robert corrected. "This is a family project. I want all of you involved. Sarah, you'll design the education programs. James, you'll handle the legal and corporate structure. Michael, you'll help with fundraising and community outreach. Denise, you'll oversee all the culinary programs and help select who gets commercial kitchen space." "And what about us?" Maya asked, ever direct. Robert smiled. "You and Emma and RJ, you're going to be the first students, the first kids to go through our programs. You're going to help us make sure we're actually serving children well, not just creating programs adults think are good." "Can we name one of the rooms?" Emma asked. "You can name whatever you want," Robert said. The family spent hours that evening, planning and dreaming and building something bigger than any of them could create alone. They argued about details, laughed about possibilities, and ultimately created a vision that honored both the past and the future. Later, after everyone else had left, and it was just Robert and Denise cleaning up the papers and drawings, she finally found words. "You're building a legacy," she said. "A real legacy, not just money or buildings, but actual change." "We're building it," Robert corrected. "None of this happens without you, without Maya's call, without you taking a chance on a strange old man who showed up at your door." "I'm glad she called the wrong number," Denise said. "So am I. Best wrong number I ever answered." They stood together in the restaurant that had started it all, looking at blueprints for something even bigger, even more meaningful. "Helen would be proud of you," Denise said softly. "I hope so. I'm trying to be the man she always believed I could be. Better late than never, right?" Never too late to do the right thing. Robert pulled out one more document. This one he'd kept separate. There's something else. Something just for you and Maya, if you'll accept it. It was adoption papers, legal documents that would make him Maya's grandfather in every legal sense, not just emotional, that would give her his name if Denise approved, that would secure her future in ways that went beyond money. I know I'm not her biological grandfather, Robert said quietly, but she's my granddaughter in my heart, same as RJ and Emma, and I want to make it official. I want to make sure she's protected, provided for, part of the family in every legal sense, if that's okay with you. Denise was crying again, overwhelmed by the gesture and everything it meant. You want to adopt her. I want to be her grandfather, legally, permanently, with all the rights and responsibilities that come with it. She changed my life. Let me secure hers. Yes, Denise whispered. Yes, of course yes. They hugged, this woman who'd let him into her life, and this man who'd seen her when she was invisible to everyone else. And somewhere in heaven, Helen Whitmore smiled, knowing her husband had finally learned the lesson she'd tried to teach him all along, that wealth isn't what you keep, it's what you give away, that success isn't what you build, it's who you lift up, that legacy isn't money or buildings or businesses, it's lives changed, people helped, dreams realized, and family isn't who shares your blood, it's who answers when you call. 5 years later, Robert Whitmore stood in front of a much larger building than the modest restaurant that had started everything. The spring sun warmed his face as he watched workers put up the final sign, the Crawford Whitmore Community Kitchen and Learning Center in memory of Helen Whitmore. The building was beautiful, modern but warm, glass and brick combining to create something both professional and welcoming. 3 stories of purpose and hope and second chances. The transformation from blueprint to reality had taken 3 years of planning, fundraising, building, but it was finally complete. What had started as Denise's small restaurant had grown into something much bigger, much more impactful. There were now 5 Denise's Kitchen locations across the city, each one a hub for its neighborhood, each one employing people who needed good jobs with dignity and fair wages. The profits from those restaurants helped fund this center, along with Robert's foundation and corporate partnerships, and individual donors who believed in the mission. Denise stood beside him, tears streaming down her face but her smile radiant. I can't believe this is real, she whispered for the 100th time that morning. Believe it, Robert said, his own voice thick with emotion. You earned every bit of this, every single bit. Maya, now 11 and tall for her age, with her mother's grace and her grandfather's determination, ran up with Emma. Both girls were wearing matching t-shirts that said Junior Chefs with the center's logo. Grandpa Robert, they're about to start the ribbon cutting. You need to be up front. The crowd was huge. Hundreds of people gathered for the grand opening. Media, community members, city officials, corporate sponsors, and most importantly, the people who would actually use the center. Single parents looking for job training, kids eager for cooking classes, aspiring food entrepreneurs needing kitchen space and mentorship, families needing community meals and support. Front and center were the people who mattered most to Robert. Sarah, now a 3rd grade teacher who volunteered at the center every Saturday, beaming with pride. James, who'd restructured his law practice to focus on non-profit work and served on the center's board. Michael and Jennifer, and RJ, who'd relocated to the city 2 years ago specifically to be closer to family. Catherine and Emma, Denise's employees who'd become family, friends and neighbors from Riverside Avenue. Mrs. Jackson, Marcus the heating repair guy, a whole community that had grown from one little girl's wrong number call. The mayor handed Robert and Denise the ceremonial scissors. Before we cut this ribbon, Robert said into the microphone, his voice carrying across the crowd, I need to tell you all a story about a wrong number call. He told them about Maya's call, about a 6-year-old reading a cereal box wrong and reaching out for help, about Denise's courage in letting a stranger into her life, about how a simple act of answering the phone had changed absolutely everything. This center, he continued, his voice strong despite the emotion, is proof that investing in people matters more than investing in profit, that showing up matters, that believing in someone when they've stopped believing in themselves can literally change the world. My late wife Helen understood that. Denise Crawford lives that. Her daughter Maya embodies that. And now we're going to teach it to as many people as possible. He paused, looking at his family, his real family made of biology and choice and love and commitment. Helen always said that success isn't about what you accumulate, it's about what you create. Not money or things but opportunities, connections, communities, hope. She believed in using what we had to lift others up. This center is her dream made real. 30 years after she first shared it with me, Denise stepped up to the microphone, her voice steady despite tears. 5 years ago I was a single mother working night shifts, living in a cold apartment, watching my daughter ask strangers for help because she didn't know what else to do. I thought dreams were luxuries I couldn't afford. I thought I'd work myself to death and that would just be my story. Her voice strengthened. But then this man answered my daughter's call, and instead of hanging up, instead of sending a check, instead of doing the easy thing, he showed up. He saw me not as someone to save but as someone worth investing in. He believed in my dream when I'd stopped believing in it myself. She looked directly at the crowd, her gaze sweeping across faces of all colors and ages and circumstances. I want to say something to every single mother out there working 2 jobs and wondering if you'll make it. To every kid who's scared and cold and hoping someone will hear you. To everyone who's ever felt invisible or forgotten, or like your dreams don't matter because you don't have money or connections or privilege. Her voice broke but she pushed through. You matter, your dreams matter. And sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places, but you have to be brave enough to ask for it, and humble enough to accept it when it shows up. She gestured to the building behind her. This center exists because a 6-year-old was brave enough to ask for help, because a stubborn single mother was humble enough to accept it, because a lonely old man was wise enough to understand that money without purpose is just paper. We built this together, and now we're going to help as many people as we can do the same thing. Together Robert and Denise cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted in applause that seemed to shake the very air. Maya and Emma and RJ rushed forward to be the first ones through the doors, their laughter and excitement infectious. Inside the center was everything they'd dreamed. Commercial kitchens gleaming and ready, classrooms set up with cooking stations, a community dining room that could serve 200 people, offices for job counseling and business development, a children's activity center, a library focused on food culture and entrepreneurship, a Helen Whitmore Memorial Scholarship office where people could apply for funding to pursue their dreams. Robert stood in the middle of it all, watching his grandchildren run through the halls, watching Denise beam with pride, watching strangers become family as they explored this space built on hope and second chances. Sarah came up and put her arm around her father. Mom would love this, Dad. She'd be so proud of you. I'm trying to make up for lost time, Robert admitted. For all the years I didn't listen to her, didn't understand what she was trying to teach me. You're not making up for anything, Sarah said firmly. You're honoring her. There's a difference. You're taking what she taught you and multiplying it, sharing it, building something that will help people for generations. James joined them, Michael right behind him. Group hug, James suggested. They stood together, Robert and his 3 children, holding each other in the center they'd built together, in the legacy they'd created not from obligation but from love. Later, after the official opening ceremony ended, and most people had left to explore the building, Robert found himself alone in what would be the main community dining room. He sat at one of the tables, exhausted but happier than he'd ever been. Denise found him there, just as she had so many times before. Thank you, Robert, she said, sitting down beside him, for everything, for answering Maya's call, for seeing me, for building all of this. Thank you for letting me, he replied, for giving me purpose, for reminding me what actually matters. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who've been through everything together. You know what the best part is, Denise said eventually. What's that? Maya still thinks she called the wrong number. She still feels bad about it sometimes, like she made a mistake. Robert laughed softly. Maybe we should tell her the truth. What truth? That there are no wrong numbers. Only unexpected answers to prayers we didn't know we were praying. Denise smiled. I like that. Outside, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in oranges and pinks and purples. Through the large windows, they could see Maya and Emma and RJ playing in the courtyard, their laughter carrying on the spring breeze. 5 years ago, a little girl had dialed a wrong number looking for help with heat. She'd found a grandfather, a family, a future. He'd found purpose, redemption, a second chance at being the man his wife always believed he could be. Together they'd built something that would help thousands of people find their own second chances, their own dreams, their own proof that reaching out for help wasn't weakness, but courage. The legacy wasn't the building, or the money, or the businesses. The legacy was the simple revolutionary idea that showing up for each other, really showing up, could change the world one person at a time. It started with a wrong number, a cold apartment, a desperate child, and a lonely old man. It grew into family, community, hope, transformation, and it would continue long after they were gone, rippling outward in ways they'd never fully see but would always, always matter. Because that's what love does, what family does, what grace does. It multiplies, it spreads, it transforms. One call at a time, one kindness at a time, one opened heart at a time, until the whole world is just a little bit warmer, a little bit kinder, a little bit more like home. And somewhere in heaven, Helen Whitmore looked down at her husband and smiled. He'd finally learned the lesson. Wealth isn't what you keep, it's what you give away. Success isn't what you build, it's who you lift up. And family isn't who shares your blood, it's who answers when you call.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.